Black college sports and then some. We got it right here on HSRN The Network, the voice of HBCU sports.
You are listening to Green Talk for Brown Folks with Ryan Marshall on HSRN.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Ryan Marshall, your host of Green Talk for Brown Folks, GTBF. It's so good to be back here for another episode of GTBF, and I'm really, really excited to talk to you about the conversation that we're getting ready to have today. In the last few weeks on GTBF, we've had some really, really good one-on-one conversations. We had a conversation with Morris Brown College president, the 19th president of that great college, Dr. Kevin James, who talked about the growth of that campus and what they're doing in their hard reset. And then the last episode we had a one-on-one with international best-selling author, transformation strategist, motivational speaker, entrepreneur, Jasmine Romaine, who talked about, as part of the Entrepreneur Series, what she did to grow her business, how she helps others be the best self they could be by helping to transform their minds, their bodies, their souls. And it was a really, really powerful discussion. The common thread with both of those conversations was entrepreneurship. And it was very important because today you see a lot of people really trying to control their own lives or have better control of their lives, take control of their financial future, take control of their destiny, trying to have better work-life balance. And so we're going to continue our entrepreneurship series. Today's episode is going to be talking about the Great Resignation. Now, that has really been in the news a lot lately, the Great Resignation, where people are quitting their jobs in droves. I mean, absolutely, just voluntarily walking away and saying, you know what, peace, I'm out, I'm not doing this anymore, so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, the U.S. Labor Department put out some figures, and in August 2021, a record 4.3 million workers, U.S. workers, walked out of their jobs. That is a staggering number. And there could be a few reasons why that's happening. Obviously, the one overarching theme would be the pandemic. And that has affected people in a lot of ways. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But the Great Resignation ties into people wanting to take more control of their lives. And a large swath of those people are moving to entrepreneurship. And so not just walking away solely from their job to look for a better job, but they're walking away from working for somebody else all the way together and working for themselves to try to give themselves a better life. And that's what this episode is going to be about, is just kind of talking about that, pushing into the entrepreneurship series, and eventually leading into our entrepreneurship roundtable. So I'm really kind of excited to talk about this, but I want to go back to this Great Resignation. And 4.3 million people losing their jobs, or not losing their jobs, leaving their jobs is what I should say. Leaving, walking away. And there are probably a few different factors when you're talking about this. And at first, a lot of people noted that many of the people that were walking away from these jobs were low-wage jobs. They were jobs in retail. They were jobs in hospitality. And yes, that might have been true. A lot of people that, if you remember, during the pandemic and at the height of the pandemic, a lot of people that were catching coronavirus were people, frontline workers, people that were working these jobs on the front line, either in food services or hospitality or retail. And a lot of people were afraid to work those types of jobs for fear of catching the coronavirus. And so that, coupled with there was an economic stimulus that came in several different packages, the CARES package, from last year. And then there were some other stimulus packages that President Biden has put forth in this past year 2021, a lot of people were making more money just sitting at home than they were actually working out on the front lines. And so for the people that did go to work, there was a huge labor shortage. And so everywhere I go, it seems like now I go into this restaurant, this place, they're looking for workers. They're now hiring signs everywhere. Okay. Those people that are still working are having to, in a lot of situations, work for 2 people or work for 3 or 4 people. They're doing double or triple for the same amount of money. Then what ended up happening, I believe, was that a lot of people in the pandemic went on and it's going on, 2 years now. A lot of people that were working from home, that were able to take these conference calls at home for work, that, maybe had worked longer hours, but they had some more work-life balance. They were able to spend more time with their family, be able to just not have to deal with the work commute. All of a sudden, little by little, those things have been slowly but surely coming back. Some companies are now requiring their employees to return to the office, return to work. Now, all of a sudden, people that had been at home for the last year or 2 years because of the pandemic, now back to returning to work. Maybe they were in jobs that they were unsatisfied or unhappy with. They didn't necessarily like their boss, or didn't necessarily like their coworker. The environment wasn't great. They stayed in a crappy job because it was paying the bills, and having the pandemic was sort of a godsend, if you will, for some people, that they were able to reclaim some of the time that they had lost. Now they're going back. Now they're losing that work-life balance. And now that workload is going up and wages aren't getting any better, and they aren't keeping with the pace of inflation. And so now some of those people now are starting to say, you know what? I'm going to take back my life. I want to do something better and have something better than what I already have now. So a lot of people without the big safety net financially in a lot of ways are just saying, you know what? I'm going to take a chance on myself. And I'm going to bet on myself, and I'm going to walk away. And traditionally, the rule of thumb that we talked about with respect to having any sort of emergency fund is about 3 to 6 months. We talk about having 3 to 6 months of your monthly expenditures set aside for emergencies. And obviously, an emergency is loss of employment or a furlough or a job or something of that nature. We're going on, a year, 2 years now in a pandemic. And so people that had been out of a job previously, that may have had to take low wage jobs just to sustain, financially, now they're just like, you know what? I don't know that I can really do this anymore. And so all of that combined, you cook all of that up, and it's a great recipe for what we have now as the Great Resignation. And so you have a lot of those people that are leaving jobs either for better jobs or better paying jobs, jobs that give them greater satisfaction, better work-life balance, or they're just leaving all the way together, and they're saying, you know what, I want to work for myself. And this is a great opportunity for me now to take a chance on myself, to be able to get that work-life balance back and become an entrepreneur. And that is what I believe is happening with a lot of people now. So a lot of people are looking for alternative ways to create income for themselves, to support their families, to be able to get back what they haven't had, I don't think, in quite some time. And the pandemic was a perfect opportunity for a lot of families to be able to get that time. So we're going to dive right into, in the next segment, talking about this switch now to entrepreneurship, and how, especially in the African American community, in the Black community, and communities of color, that entrepreneurship now is seen as the wave, not only for the future, but the wave of today. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to get into some things that people can do as entrepreneurs to support their family, some of the businesses and the opportunities that may be out there, what to look for, and some of those keys. And we'll get into that in the next segment. I'm Ryan Marshall, your host of GTBF, Green Talk for Brown Folks. We'll be right back.
You are listening to Green Talk for Brown Folks with Ryan Marshall on HSRN.
Oh, welcome back here to Green Talk for Brown Folks, GTBF. I'm your host, Ryan Marshall. We're in Season 1, Episode 10. We're talking about the name of this show, The Great Resignation, as part of our entrepreneurship series. And I'm so excited because we're pushing forward to our entrepreneurship roundtable that we're going to have a panel discussion with a group of fantastic entrepreneurs from many different sectors and many different industries and a lot of different things. We're just really excited for that. And so we're getting closer and closer to that. And so we're talking about this great resignation. And I think I talked about in the first segment, 4.3 million people, a record 4.3 million people quit their jobs, left their jobs in the month of August, according to the United States Labor Department. And that is a staggering thing. Many of those people went into entrepreneurship. And so obviously entrepreneurship is kind of like that sexy word now. People want to be able to control their lives and control their time, want to be able to figure out how not to have a boss and work for somebody else. And so we start talking about those things and what are some of the ways that you can, in fact, support your family, do what it is that you want to do as an entrepreneur, be able to reclaim that work-life balance, be able to reclaim the freedom of time. And so one of the things that you're going to know is that obviously, when you jump into entrepreneurship, it's going to be, it's going to be different. Most people think that, hey, I'm going to be this entrepreneur and I'm just going to jump right into it and everything's going to be fine. But in the grand scheme of things, being in business is a very different animal than working, for somebody else, working for a company. And so in a lot of ways, you're responsible for all of the paperwork. You're responsible for all of the overhead and the business and expenses and all of those things. And it's all on you. And so one of the things that I can say as a fellow entrepreneur, is it doesn't happen overnight. And so you have to be able to temper your expectations that people think they're just going to wake up and all of a sudden I'm going to make this $100,000 or this $500,000 or whatever it is, the number that you have in your head. And you have to temper that expectation that it's going to happen overnight, that I'm just going to just get rich and I'm just going to be so successful. Being in business for yourself, it takes time. And so that's one of the most important things that I can share and relay to the listeners out there, that being an entrepreneur, it takes some tweaking. It takes some failing. And, a lot of times you hear Michael Jordan, the reason why he was so successful in what he did was because he failed over and over and over again. And sometimes people don't have a high tolerance for being able to fail, to be able to hear when you pitch an idea or you pitch a product or you pitch yourself and somebody says no. A no can hurt, and take it from me, I certainly understand. No, in a lot of ways, sometimes it's not just no, I don't want this idea, or no, I don't want this product, or no, I don't want you. It could be no, not yet. It could be no for a bazillion different reasons. Maybe not just because I'm not interested, but we just don't really know. And so that's the one thing I can say is it just takes time when it comes to entrepreneurship. But one of the things we talk about is there are some ways that you can create income for yourself, and there are a lot of low cost ways to start businesses. And there are some businesses that have very high startup costs. but there are a lot of businesses that have some very low and inexpensive startup costs. And in one of the I think the best ways when you're talking about being an entrepreneur, trying to find ways that you can get passive income or income that is you're going to be able to get without committing a whole lot of your time. That's going to be one of the best ways in creating income for yourself. And you could be an entrepreneur in different ways. And so if one of the ways that I think people can think about, if you have the ability to be able to do this, then maybe doing Airbnb. For people that are homeowners or that have, property that they could be able to utilize to be able to create as accommodations in that way, Vrbo, Airbnb, some of those places, some of those things like that. That could be a good way for people to bring in extra income for you either to supplement, or I've seen a lot of people that are just raking it in hand over fist, being able to provide accommodations, provide a room, provide an entire home. If they have a rental property or a garage that maybe they've converted into a space where people can rent. I think that's a good way to go. Some people, depending on your comfort, obviously we're still in the middle of a pandemic, but I mean, people are starting to say, you know what, we've been in this thing for 2 years. I'm either fully vaccinated or I'm comfortable. I'm safe. I sanitize everything. I'm as safe as I possibly can. And within reason, you can do this, with no contact and, be safe and sanitary about it. I think that's a great way for some people to be able to make money. But what if I don't have a home? What if I don't have something like that? And I think about other ways that you can become an entrepreneur where you can generate income for yourself. I think about ways like Turo. I think one of those things that people may not understand, Turo is a way where people can utilize their own vehicles and allow people to rent their own vehicles, like you would go to Hertz, like you would go to Budget or Avis or Alamo and rent a car from one of those companies. People can rent your vehicle from you for a fee per day. And that would be especially for somebody that may have multiple vehicles and they're not using multiple vehicles. They might be home all the time and they've got 2 or 3 cars sitting in the garage. Why not use 1 or 2 of those cars to be able to generate income for yourself and your household? There are ways and creative things that you can do to generate that income. And I think that could be a potential great way for people to, if it doesn't take a whole lot to be able to get into becoming an entrepreneur in that regard. I think that's very, very important to know that there are opportunities like that out there where people can do that. So we'll continue the conversation on the Great Resignation and entrepreneurship, some ways that you can jump into entrepreneurship, and then continue talking about low-cost ways that you can create and start a business for yourself. We'll get into that in segment 3. I'm your host, Ryan Marshall. This is GTBF, Green Talk for Brown Folks. We'll be right back.
You are listening to Green Talk for Brown Folks with Ryan Marshall on HSRN.
Welcome back, everybody, to GTBF, Green Talk for Brown Folks. I'm your host, Ryan Marshall. We're getting back into the conversation about the Great Resignation and this leading into entrepreneurship. And there's a point that I don't want to lose when talking about entrepreneurship. And we've kind of dove into the topic of businesses and finding low-cost startup businesses. The point that I want to make is that of recent, and the statistics back this up, of recent, there have been more Black entrepreneurs than in any other group in America. And Black entrepreneurs are leading this boom. And some of the reasoning behind this is because of some of the negative things that have been associated within the Black community that African Americans tend to not have as much, on average, savings. Black entrepreneurs generally tend to be younger, skew younger, and may not have the same access to employment opportunities that other groups of people, other white or Asian or other groups out there. And so looking for ways to create the income, create better opportunities, more flexible opportunities for themselves. You see a lot of African American people, a lot of people of color that are jumping into entrepreneurship. And so when we talk about entrepreneurship, it's so important to be able to talk about, I think, because of the amount of capital on average that may not be there in the African American community to be able to start businesses. It's going to be key to find ways to be able to start businesses, to create those opportunities for yourself without having to burn a lot of upfront capital. And so entrepreneurship, or being able to have that type of flexibility, might not just be about starting a business. It could be about having a side gig, a side hustle while you're working. And you see there is a big boom with companies like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, companies like that allow for people to work on their own time as entrepreneurs. A lot of people use that as side gigs that make pretty solid money doing that. And a lot of people even do that full time as well, to be able to have the flexibility of time, and then still continue to be able to be safe during the pandemic, but then continue to earn the income that they want to be able to earn for their families. And so you see a lot of people out there driving around and doing things like that. One thing that shouldn't be lost is network marketing. There are a lot of very good network marketing companies, and network marketing is you're building an organization based on your network. And so you're building people and bringing people into your organization. You have a good or product or service that you are selling, or that you have, that you want to be able to not only market to other people, but then also create a business organization and earn residual income in that regard as well, and overrides and things like that. I think that can be an important way. Obviously, network marketing sometimes has a negative stigma. You see a lot of really good network marketing companies that are really doing some great things, that have some low startup costs, that get people introduced into the world of business, that get introduced into the world of entrepreneurship, that are able to leverage the people that they know, that are able to bring others into their organization to grow businesses. Because let's be honest, in the traditional workforce, a lot of us have bosses. And so there's a bunch of workers, and then there are fewer bosses, and then they have bosses, and there's fewer of them, and then maybe a mid-level manager, and then there's always somebody at the top. Some people may try to call it a pyramid scheme, and there's a big difference between network marketing and a pyramid scheme. And I always tell people a pyramid scheme truly is if there is not an exchange of a good or a service, and you are giving people money. You bring 3 people in, or 5 people, or however many, and they give you money, and then they bring 3 people and they give them money, and that is a pyramid scheme. That you have to have a good or service. Do your research. Make sure that you do your research on the company that you align yourself with as an entrepreneur. Even within network marketing, there are companies that are very good, very reputable companies that work and have a network marketing platform now. And so because they realize that there is larger growth in that type of business platform than the traditional model of growth. And so it's always good to be able to do your research in that regard. We're going to continue this conversation on entrepreneurship and talking about the Great Resignation next week. I'm so very excited to continue this conversation and just talking about some ways that you can jump into entrepreneurship, some of the pluses and the negatives and the challenges, I would say, of entrepreneurship. And we'll jump into that next week. I'm so excited to talk about this. And then as we get closer in our entrepreneurship series to our entrepreneurship roundtable, we are going to have a group of panelists from attorneys to philanthropists to edupreneurs, all types of people talking about entrepreneurship, and we're going to have them talking directly to you about how they got started, some of the things that they did to become successful, some of the challenges that they had along the way. So that's going to be a fantastic panel. But until then, until next week, we're going to continue Great Resignation Part 2 next Friday here on Green Talk for Brown Folks on HSRN, the voice of choice. I'm your host, Ryan Marshall. So glad that you joined me for this half hour. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to Green Talk for Brown Folks with Ryan Marshall on HSRN. Follow Ryan's social media on Twitter at Ryan H. Marshall and on Instagram, RHM WealthWave. You can also connect with him via email at ryan.marshall@howmoneyworks.com. That's ryan.marshall@howmoneyworks.com. Join him next Friday at 1 p.m. for another edition of Green Talk for Brown Folks.